cast a while back when you were first campaigning for president, and you were talking about universal basic income, but then you were also saying like, and you could, don't let me put words in your mouth. You could express this better than I could, but you were talking about like having other programs and structures to support kind of productivity and like community driven collaborative efforts, whether it's in art or in other fields that were not necessarily driven by a commercial market, but were driven by other modes
Oh
of,
yeah, yeah.
I'm so interested in how that works because I don't know that commerce is the only way to drive art.
Yeah, like, thank you for calling that out. So to me, pillar number one is like put money into people's hands. Would folks have more freedom to create? Yes. Would they have more ability to reward artists and creators? Yes, if you had better structures in place. But there's like this whole set of activities that has been eroding for years and decades in the United States of America that I think most of us agree are like pretty positive stuff that the market just is not going to love. And one thing that, like, I use as an example when I travel is like local papers, local newspapers. Local newspapers are getting wiped out. Like, 1,000 local papers gone. And democracy does not function as well if you don't have local papers. So let's say even if we had more money in a community, sure, some more local papers would survive, but maybe you decide that local journalism is good regardless of whether or not like the advertising makes money or, like the subscriptions. And so if you start looking at some things that maybe we can agree are positive, which I would definitely put art in this category, I'd put local journalism in this category, I'd put volunteering for a civic organization in this category. And so volunteerism is down. Like pretty much anything where like there's something that you regard as positive in the community has been declining by the numbers for years. And so there's like this whole suite of activities where I don't think any of us necessarily wants to get quote unquote paid for everything. It's like, hey, if I volunteer for the nonprofit, like nonprofit pay me. It's
Right.
like
Right.
there has to be like some sort of activity you do that's like non-monetary, but also something that we want to reward or reinforce. And so my idea was essentially you create like a parallel economy around this other set of activities that we could use another currency for or time. And it was based on something called time banking, where
Right.
in the 60s, RFK's speechwriter was trying to figure out how to help poor communities become more socially connected. And what they came up with was something called time banking, where if I babysit your kids, then you get me back by hauling like logs off my lawn. And we essentially just trade like units of time with each other. And so you could introduce like a different currency or time units into this other set of activities that we know we need more of, but you don't want to pay people for because it's like a little messed up. And so, and I would certainly put art in this category where if someone produces public art, then they would get, this other currency reward or other people get them back in various ways. It'd be a way to try and stitch together social interactions, and also you could disclose it publicly in a way that you don't money. So if I'm like, hey, I made $1,000, like I'm an asshole if I'm like waving around like my $1,000 like above my head.
Right.
But if I got these like 1,000 social points or whatever you call them,
Yeah.
then you could actually broadcast it in a way that everyone finds perfectly socially acceptable.
Right.
And then you could even give those social points to someone else. And then they could use it for various things. So that was like the
Yeah.
thinking around like that, like you need something non-monetary for certain activities that you want to help see more of.
Can I ask you more about how that will work? I know you haven't like fleshed it out entirely, so this is maybe just a totally hypothetical situation, but I just find that so fascinating. I want to ask you more about like, so in the case of an artist, say, because that's obviously what's close to my heart and experience. So someone who makes some art, say they make a song, they record a song, and it's not necessarily like the kind of commercially viable song that a record label is going to invest in or something, but they have the potential to earn this sort of, whether it's like time banking or social points or whatever you call it. How there would have to be some kind of system in place that would determine how many social points that song is worth, or like how would that kind of.
So my thinking on this, and this is actually very close to the conversation I was having with the musicians online, would be that if I listen to the song, just by virtue of my listening to the song, you get like a social credit for the fact that I listened to it. It's like essentially a micropayment thing.
Got it. Okay, so everybody who listens to it, then that, right. Okay, so it does have to do with the audience that you garner for the art that you create.
Yeah.
Right. But so, because right now, the way that you can make money or get any kind of compensation for that sort of thing is, say you put your song on YouTube or your video on YouTube or whatever, and YouTube is able to, if 1 million or more people come and watch your video, then YouTube might make enough money on ads that they'll give you like a few bucks.
Well, this is the distinction you drew initially, Joseph, because I've been struggling with how the heck we would get this done on a societal level. Mm-hmm. You essentially want the world to look more like Netflix than YouTube.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. Right.
It's like where we're paying, but in this case, you don't necessarily want. And I think like tier 1, which would be better, is if we all had money and we're all paying for stuff. But then tier 2 would be like, hey, I'm paying with my attention, and you can take like this attention currency and use that for various things too. Some of which could be monetary, because you want to try and get the like. Because right now people are conditioned to consume art and content for free or near free, and then you pay a subscription, and then you're like, okay, now I'm in the walled garden and I get like the cool like movie or TV show from like the Joseph Gordon-Levitt's of the world. And so what you want to do is you want to create like closer to that walled garden dynamic out there, like where if you pay attention to something, then the creator is getting rewarded, and it doesn't necessitate my whipping out my credit card.
Right. Because someone has spent their time on your art. So if it were time banking, it would be that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes. And so like the time actually has value. And then if people have elected to spend their time on your art, then you actually like build up this time currency that you could trade for dollars. Like, there could be like an exchange rate essentially.
Right. So, and in order for that to happen, it would have to be kind of top down, right? Like the government would have to say, okay, the government is just like the government does with dollars. Like dollars is a top down thing. The government says, we, the United States government, are deciding that U.S. dollars are valuable, right? And so you're saying that like the government would have to say, we're also saying now that time is valuable, and here is a like government built structure, like institution for how we can exchange time currency.
So here's where it gets interesting. That time banking is in effect right now in hundreds of communities around the country. Like that, they're just doing it informally. They have some ledger. They like keep track of it. And there are also some apps, like there's one called Seva Exchange. They have Karma Points. There are different things where they're starting to try and monitor this. So if you were a foundation or a philanthropy or a billionaire or whatnot, and I know some of these characters, so this isn't entirely hypothetically, like, could you go in and say, hey guys, guess what? Like we're going to essentially guarantee your time currency at like a certain exchange. So if you do something for someone, you develop it, you get a credit, or you produce public art and people want to reward it. And then if you want, like, we've got like essentially like an exchange bank, and I'm going to monetize it to the tune of $1 million, $10 million, whatever it is. And the fun thing about this is that you could potentially create like 100 million worth of interactions or social activity with like a much smaller level of money. But you would need to essentially do it within a community the same way that communities are doing it with time banking right now. I agree with you on a macro level, you'd probably need the government lending a hand. Like if you wanted to do it like throughout the entire US economy and you were dealing with like massive numbers. But you could pilot this in a community, certainly in terms of in-person activities, and it's happening now. And then the trickier thing, which is something that I genuinely think that we need to be investing a ton of energy and resources on, is how to make it happen in the digital universe, is how to make it so that like your time is actually monetizable in a different way than advertising. Because we have to face facts that right now so much of our internet enjoyment or whatever is based on advertising. And there was a period when it seemed like, okay, this is cool. Like I've got, free Facebook, free YouTube, free this. But now it's degenerated into this form of pernicious surveillance capitalism where they're like, and among other problems, it's absolute shit for creators.
Yes. Yeah, I think it really is. And it's not just, the ads, it's what comes with the ads. Like you mentioned the difference between like a Netflix and a YouTube. And again, I'm saying again, there's lots of great stuff on YouTube. I love YouTube. I look at YouTube all the time and I find amazing things that I never would have been able to find anywhere else. Like YouTube's incredible. But there is a difference between what YouTube will recommend versus what Netflix will recommend, because there's a difference between how they're monetizing the viewers. That Netflix is trying to serve viewers something that's so good and meaningful to them that they're willing to pay out of their pocket for it. Whereas YouTube is trying to serve up things that are just going to like catch your attention and keep your attention. And it doesn't have to be so profound or meaningful that you would pay money for it. It doesn't have to be that. It just has to kind of catch you enough to keep your attention. And those are two different offerings that are a result of those two different models. And I think, like, as an artist, I'm much more interested in making art, not that's just going to catch someone's attention and kind of like hook them and keep their attention. I'm interested in making stuff that's going to be really meaningful to somebody, that they're going to think about afterwards. It's going to like, they're going to remember and feel.
You create different work based upon one goal and the other.
Yes.
The other thing is that if you do succeed in catching someone's attention, even for like X minutes, and then afterwards you're like, okay, like what did I get? Like as the creator, I mean, right now, in many cases it's next to nothing or nothing. And then that doesn't create like an ecosystem that enables that artist to like do something else, reinvest, like pay themselves, have healthcare, whatever, like the, like whatever the basics that we'd expect anyone who's working, creatively to have. Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please do subscribe to Yang Speaks and click on notifications so we can let you know every time we have a new episode.